Hello ladies and gentlemen, today we are going to be talking about Brexit, and this is from the Daily Express from this morning, and it headlines: Stubborn EU vows to ignore Boris deadline and make huge new fishing demands. So, Michael Barnier, the EU's chief negotiator, warned European ambassadors at a meeting on Wednesday any discussions at the Crunch European Council Summit in Brussels next week of a compromise, particularly around fishing, would damage unity. Clement Beaune, the Europe Minister for France, said, "Our fishermen will not be a bargaining chip for Brexit." Bearing in mind, a lot of the EU's water around Britain is Britain's waters, as we know. They will not have to pay the price for Britain's choices. Mr Barnier will press home the point to European leaders that further concessions are needed from the UK and not fall into a trap set by Boris Johnson to turn the event into negotiating deadlines, according to a confidential note seen by The Times. The EU only want to limit the summit conclusions by a simple statement, taking stock of negotiations and noting that while progress is being made on a trade deal, they will not sign one at any cost. By taking this approach, Mr Barnier is hoping to distract over the compromises he has already made in talks with the UK counterpart David Frost, or is planning to make. EU diplomats fear major setbacks in signing a deal if the discussions stray into the details of talks, which could risk a hostile reaction, even though they are fishing in our waters and selling our fish back to us. One diplomat source said, "Boris keeps saying that a deal is oven ready, but Barnier will not want to come to leaders with any half-baked deal, especially on fish. This can be dangerous and unpredictable." During talks with Lord Frost at Downing Street, the EU's chief negotiator, Mr Barnier, will tell UK counterparts the bloc wants Britain to make a major concession on level playing field subsidiary controls. The UK government has accepted principles on state aid for subsidiary control will be part of any free trade agreement, but is so far refusing to being bound too much to what the future enforcement regime will be. Lord Frost is also standing firm over a demand from the EU that Britain adapts regulations in line with the European legislation on the environment and food safety as it develops. And as we all know, the EU was not set up to actually control our fishing waters, our food standards, what we actually have in Britain. None of it. Okay, so a quick bit here from this morning. Ireland hopeful of limited Brexit trade deal. The country's foreign minister, Simon Coveney, believes the UK and EU can strike a limited trade deal and agree to implement the terms of the divorce settlement around arrangements for the Irish border. Simon Coveney told the News Talk radio station, "I believe we can get a deal both in terms of limited trade agreement that avoids tariffs and quotas, and put in place the Northern Ireland Protocol that has been agreed to in the withdrawal treaty," which they are very much holding over the British Parliament's heads. Barnier and Frost locked in crunch talks in London. Michael Barnier is holding talks with David Frost in London as time runs out for a deal on a post-Brexit trade agreement, even though most people who voted for Brexit do just want a WTO terms deal or clean break Brexit, however you want to put it. Boris Johnson wants an agreement in place by the time of next Thursday European Council Summit in Brussels. The meeting in London comes after the Prime Minister and European Council President Ursula von der Leyen agreed last week to intensify negotiations in a final push for an agreement. A further round of talks will be held in Brussels next week before the crucial summit in the Belgian capital, to which Britain never seems to come out doing very well with from these talks. UK and EU enter crucial week with warning from Brussels. Even though it's been over 4 years since we voted originally, and we're supposed to actually be out about 2 years ago. The UK and EU are entering a crucial week in post-Brexit trade talks ahead of next week's Crunch European Council Summit in Brussels. Boris Johnson has set the summit date as a deadline for determining whether an agreement on a future relationship can be reached before the transition period deadline of December 31st. Even though once we leave on New Year's Eve, the UK and the European will be trading with each other, because European countries are going to want to trade with us, which just goes to show the power, really, that the European Union are trying to hold over everybody, considering that they are an organisation and not a country. But ahead of the summit, European Council President Charles Michel said the negotiations on a trade deal have reached the moment of truth. He insisted EU wants a deal, but not at any cost, and has told the UK to put its cards on the table. Mr. Michel said the coming days are crucial. This is the moment of truth. There is only 1 week to go before the European Council on October the 15th and 16th, which is Thursday and Friday next week. He added, I have been very clear with Prime Minister Johnson. It's now for the UK to restore trust and to put all its cards on the table. The EU is doing its utmost to find an agreement with the UK, but not at any cost. It's constantly, everything is always on the European Union's terms. So here we go with the SNPs to do with Brexit again. SNP's attempt to keep Scotland linked to Brussels post-Brexit shot down by the EU, which I suppose is one good thing for once. Brussels has shot down Nicola Sturgeon's SNP plans to link Scotland closely with the European Union after Brexit with an EU official warning. It would create a difficult position. Of course it would, because Scotland is very much still part of the Union of Great Britain, whether the SNP party actually like it or not. A new bill put forward by Ms Sturgeon's Constitution Secretary hopes to allow Scottish ministers a discretionary power to align laws with EU legislation. The UK withdrawal from the European Union bill means on developed matters Scotland can keep in line with those in Europe, when appropriate and practical to do so. The bill proposes to allow the Scottish Government to use regulations rather than legislation to keep pace with the European Union on developed areas after Brexit, which the European Union very much want everything to follow their guidelines and not what the individual countries want, because as we all know, the four nations in Britain are very different, but at the same time very similar, all very British in their own different ways. And while there are a lot of similarities with mainland Europe, and we're all quite happy to be Europeans, the rest of the European countries are all different as well. We are all very different, while still quite happily all being part of Europe, just not the European Union. The bill also includes provisions to ensure the EU environmental principles and governance can continue in Scotland. A new body called Environmental Standards Scotland will be set up to ensure compliance with environmental law under the legislation. So again, a new committee is being set up again. So the last bit now. The bill has now been scrutinised by cross-party SNP, Labour, Lib Dem and Tory SNPs on Holyrood's Finance and Constitution Committee, who stressed the Scottish Government would need to be clearer on how they would exercise such power, backfired the initial reasoning of the bill. But Brussels has cast doubts over the legislation, stressing Scotland would have to reapply if they wanted to rejoin the EU, just like everyone else, even though Scotland are still part of Great Britain. And then, Brexiteer issues no deal warning to EU. Conservative MP John Redwood tweeted, "The UK should not surrender our fish or our law-making powers. Leave the talks as promised if the EU still don't agree. A free trade agreement. We trade well with the US without an agreement, so FTAs are not essential." And as we all know, if it wasn't for the European Union, we would be progressing so much more. We would absolutely be progressing so much more, and we can do so many trade deals, talks, arrangements, all sorts of things with the rest of the world perfectly fine. It's only the European Union that are keeping us back. Thank you very much for watching. If you like the video, then subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell so you get to see every video as it's released. Give it a thumbs up by liking this video, comment underneath, and share this video so others can see it. Thank you very much, and have an awesome day.